Hello, this is Nick Coons again, and you are either watching this through the Red 7 Linux YouTube channel or listening to this through the Geeks podcast. Either way, welcome. This topic I wanted to post in both places because I think it applies to both. It applies to both what Red 7 does, and it applies to people who would listen to the Geeks show. About a month ago, maybe a little longer, I did a YouTube video regarding custom software development and why that could be beneficial to businesses. And this is something that got some pretty good feedback on, and it's worked out well for us. And I wanted to talk about a particular issue that I had with some software development that I did for a client recently and how it was resolved. The reason I think this is beneficial for the Red 7 Linux YouTube channel is because I think people can start to get a sense of different things that are available through custom software development and why they would want to use that. And the reason I think it would be applicable to the Gutsy Geeks is because, well, all the software was done software development was done on Linux. Most of it was done on Linux. You'll see why there had to be some Windows involvement here in a little bit. But I think people who are on the real geeky side of Linux would appreciate the process, and people who are more just interested in what Linux can do would like to know that these sorts of things are available, and that this sort of software exists and the different options that you have in the open source world. So I had a client who wanted me to create document templates so that they could auto-generate those templates similar to the way Microsoft would do a mail merge. So for instance, if you had a letter in Microsoft Word that said dear, and then it had a space or a variable where it said name, and then you might have an Excel spreadsheet with 10 or 100 different names, and it would print out 10 or 100 different letters with those names in there, each filling out all the appropriate information from the Excel spreadsheet. So this is essentially what they were looking for, but more complex. They wanted it to tie in with some software that we had built for them before, and have it generate court pleadings and a whole slew of other documents. Now, normally this wouldn't be a big deal, except that the final document has to come out as a Word document. It can't be a PDF, it can't be an open office, because they're submitting these things to the courts, and the courts specifically want Word documents. Not just things that can be opened by Word, but Word documents. So I started out with a couple different methods of this. I've done a lot of HTML to PDF type of generation before, but I didn't want to go that route this time, obviously because I can't do PDFs with this setup. So what I did is I found out the formatting for the open document format, the specifications, and I started working with that. Started working with ODT files. Here was my idea. An ODT file, one that OpenOffice generates, is essentially a zip file. When you unzip it, you get a bunch of other files that include the content of the document and the styling of the document, and it's all in XML format, which is kind of a complex HTML, a complex web markup language. And so you can edit this with a text editor, and it's all the specifications are all open. And so the idea was to take this ODT, this OpenOffice template, unzip it, modify the content with the data that needs to go into it, zip it back up, have an OpenOffice document, and then use OpenOffice at the command line, because there is a command line conversion program, to convert it to a Word doc. This all worked well, except for the pleading document for the court had special formatting needs. It has the margin lines, it has the line numbering, things that when you try and open those with OpenOffice and then resave it back out as Word docs, you actually lose. You lose that formatting. The reason is because the Word doc specification is completely proprietary, locked down, and has been developed since the early 90s and piled on top of piles of crap. So no one really knows how this works except for Microsoft Word. Any supporting of a Word document format by a third party like OpenOffice is going to be partial. It's not going to be perfect, and it's all going to be based on reverse engineering. So this is one of those things where we have the margin lines and the line numbers in the document being the casualties in this case, and that's not acceptable for this particular thing. So I found a service online called LiveDocX, and this is exactly what they do. You take a docx or a doc template and send it to them all through an automated process, and then send them the data, and they send you back a Word doc or a docx file that has it all taken care of. Well, I went ahead and I started developing the software around this method using their free service. And it takes about 3 or 4 seconds to generate the document, which is pretty good. So my customer hits a button, 3 or 4 seconds later, they've got the document generated with all the data directly from their software. Everything sounds good, except I find out after developing this and putting it in place, LiveDocX does not support line numbers or margin lines. So it seems that this is something that I'm going to have a lot of difficulty with. I started going through various other possible routes, such as taking the Word doc, converting it to a rich text format, which is also similar to an ODT file in the sense that it's a text file, but it has codes that represent the formatting. So I can edit this rich text file. Problem is, rich text files also don't support the line numberings properly, and they don't support the margin lines. So I went through a slew of different possibilities. I recreated the template from scratch in OpenOffice, hoping that I could get a template that I wanted that had the line numbers and the margin lines in it, and then I could export that as an ODT file, then convert it to a Word doc. But that didn't work because I still lost formatting. With these documents that are heavily dependent on formatting, you are going to lose something a lot of times when you go between OpenOffice and Microsoft Word. So I knew there was a last resort option here that I really did not want to go for, and it turns out I had to. Essentially, here's how it works. You have to build a Windows server, and I didn't want to build a new box for it, so what I did is I created an XP virtual machine that I ran on the customer's existing Linux server, and then I installed a copy of Microsoft Office on it. I installed PHP and Apache, Apache being the web server, PHP being the programming language, and I used what Windows calls COM calls to actually control Microsoft Word from PHP, from within PHP. And so what happened was I was able to write an API on the Windows machine that I could submit the template to and the data to, and it would send me back a completed Word document with all the information put in place. So here's how this software works. When you make a call to this API, PHP on the Windows machine launches a copy of Microsoft Word. It executes all the keystrokes in the form of search and replace options to replace the variables with the actual data. It saves out the document and spits it back to the program. So within my application on the Linux server, I can say, here's the document template and here's all the data. I give it to it, and it submits back a Word document to me with all the data completed in the template. This process takes about 7 seconds because on the virtual machine, like I said, it has to launch a copy of Microsoft Word, has to fill in all the blanks, save the document, spit the document back out to me. So we are actually using Microsoft Word to do this. Of course, that is a huge pain. It's a resource drain on the server. With the volume that they have, I don't think that resource drain is going to be a big deal. But the major plus is because we are using Microsoft Word for this, we have 100% perfect formatting. We don't lose any formatting throughout this process. We get to keep all that and don't run into any of these problems. So these are the types of things that are available through the ingenuity of open source, where you can use an open source language to make calls to even proprietary systems and say, here's how the application is going to function, control it through the programming interface without having to have someone sitting there and typing all the information in place. So they get to go into their software, which is all Linux-based, and hit a button, and it generates the document for them, and it does it through this Windows machine that they never have to see. That's the best part about it. So this is something that now that we have this API in place, we can do all sorts of document generation for them and create documents to their heart's content without having to rebuild all this because it's already built now. So I figured the folks in Gutsy Geeks might appreciate learning how this process works, and if you're doing any custom programming yourselves, that you might enjoy this particular process. And of course, you can always email me through the website if you're interested in some more specifics, looking for some code snippets on how I've done this. And I thought this would be good on the Red 7 side because it provides information on what really is available, what kind of things can be done with custom software, and why you might want to look at going that route rather than trying to buy something that's just off the shelf, that's pre-made, that does maybe 90% of what you want, but you're going to have people on staff to spend man hours doing that 10% that you didn't want to do because the software just doesn't do exactly what you want. So if you're listening to us on Gutsy Geeks, don't forget to fan us on Facebook, and both on Gutsy Geeks and the Red 7 side. Check out the Red 7 Linux YouTube channel. We've got videos up there. And if you're listening to us on the Red 7 side, don't forget to visit gutsygeeks.com. Make sure you're also fanning us on Facebook to take advantage of various offers and deals that we've got going on at our 3 retail locations in Tempe, Mesa, and Scottsdale, all 3 in the Phoenix metro area. And we'll talk to you soon.